Which brings us to RTAs. RTAs bug people a lot. So I'm going to just focus on the salient points with each one of these types of the three major types of RTAs. First of all, I don't know why they're labeled 1, 2, and 4, and there's no 3, but there's actually a historical reason, but that's just how it is. I personally don't like using these numbers. I like using names. So instead of calling it type 1 RTA, I call it distal RTA because it reflects where the pathophysiology is. In distal RTA, the basic pathophysiology is failure of acidification of the urine. So it's failure of the hydrogen pump. And the major features of distal RTA are a hyperchloremic metabolic acidosis, true of all RTAs, hypokalemia, a normal anion gap, true of all RTAs, the inability to acidify the urine. So a urine pH that you can't get low means you can't acidify the urine, meaning that there's something wrong in the distal tubule. Tip off to RTA, type 1 RTA. And most importantly, I didn't put a star here, but you should. That is that distal RTAs can ultimately result in precipitation of calcium, either in the kidney, which is called nephrocalcinosis, or as stones, so nephrolithiasis. So distal RTA, stones. Remember that. Type 2 RTA is better known as proximal RTA. The proximal nephron is the workhorse of the kidney. That's where everything is like resorbed and reclaimed. And if somebody has a disorder of the proximal nephron, if it's a large kind of systemic disorder, we call it Fanconi syndrome. And those people dump everything. So you see phosphate in the urine and glucose and magnesium and bicarbonate. They dump bicarbonate, and that's how they get their acidosis. Because they dump bicarbonate, they end up going to a certain level, like 18 or 16 of serum bicarbonate, and then they just hang out there. In adults don't present with Fanconi syndrome all that often, but adults with Wilson's disease and cystinosis. But Wilson's disease, for some reason, pops up on the boards. So Wilson's disease can give you a proximal disorder. Multiple myeloma can give you a proximal disorder, ultimately leading to a proximal RTA. And finally, type 4 RTA, nephrologists sit in dark rooms and complain that we shouldn't call this an RTA. Type 4 RTA is also called hyporenin hypoaldo, and that explains a lot because hyporenin hypoaldo ultimately results in high potassiums because of failure of aldosterone to work normally to excrete the potassium. These people also have a hyperchloremic metabolic acidosis.